Hello and welcome back to J.P.'s World of Wrestling. I'm your man J.P. and today we continue on with the Mattel Retros. Today we actually conclude the Mattel Retro series and we're concluding it with a bang. And today, of course, we're referring to this guy. But before we get here, I want to kind of show you kind of the sort of the evolution of, or the progression of Hulk Hogan action figures. So everybody understands Hulk Hogan's wrestling history if you're a fan. You know, he started out years ago, like probably the late 70s, but like in the early, like really early 80s, he was in the WWF as Hulk Hogan, and he was a heel, and he was managed by Classy Freddie Blassie, and you know he's a big guy. He had a match with Bob Backlund at Madison Square Garden for the WWF title, but but then he got an offer to do a movie, Rocky III, with Sylvester Stallone. So he really didn't want to pass that up. But Vince McMahon Sr. told Hulk Hogan, well, if you go do that movie, then you're not going to have a job here because I've got you booked in all these places. So Hulk held his ground and said, well, I don't care. I'm going to go. I can't pass this up. So Hulk went to do the movie. He was in Rocky III as Thunderlips. We've seen the classic Thunderlips figure on this channel. So then, because he couldn't work for the WWF, he went to the AWA, promoted by Vern Gagne. And he had a successful run there, but he was never really able to win the world title there. You know, he always came close. He kind of had matches with Nick Bockwinkel, and they were pretty good matches from what I can remember. I mean, I wasn't really a big AWA fan just because I didn't really have access to it. But I've gone back since then and watched some of those matches, and they were pretty good. And that was kind of the birth sort of Hulkamania. That's kind of where the ripping of the shirt kind of came from, and he was really popular there. He was a huge star in AWA, but initially, I think the reason why he left AWA is because Vern Gagne was trying to take some of his T-shirt royalties or his T-shirt sales money, which they were shirts that he had made himself. He paid his own money to have them made, and Vern Gagne wanted a piece of it, and Hulk said, nah, I don't think so. So Hulk signed with WWF, and in 1983, he returned to the WWF, and in 1984, shortly after the Iron Sheik had beaten Bob Backlund for the WWF title, Hulk Hogan had his match. He beat the Iron Sheik for the title. Shortly after that is when these came out. This is Hulk Hogan's LJN figure, probably one of the greatest wrestling figures ever. So Hulk had a really great run in WWF during this period, during the early to mid 80s. He was biggest star in the world, biggest wrestling star in the world up to that point. So Hulk Hogan had action figures, and they sold like crazy, did really well. But then eventually, LJN stopped making the WWF wrestling figures, and then it was Hasbro. Now this is the one Hasbro that I left out of the Hasbro series, and I did it intentionally because I wanted to combine it all when I did the Hulk Hogan video. But this is Hulk Hogan's third Hasbro figure. It's probably the best one of the four of them. The first one had kind of an open stance where his hands are like wide open, and he kind of did this Hulk Hogan body slam move, action move, which wasn't very good. I had the first one, but then they came out with this bear hug one where he's just always just in a bear hug. You move his arms apart and then you go like at him, and that was a terrible figure. Really unusable figure. Completely unusable figure. So then they came out with this one. I like this figure. This is probably the most usable Hogan Hasbro figure out there. And then they came out with a fourth one, which is also pretty good. but I like the pose in this one. I like the pose in the fourth one. So Hulk Hogan, of course, huge star in the. I mean, he kind of made the WWF in the '80s. Nobody was bigger than Hulk Hogan ever. But his career was kind of running its course in WWF. The fans were initially kind of getting tired of him in WWF. They were tired of the hulking up, and they were tired of him being the champion. They were tired of him winning every time. So he left the WWF, and then he went to WCW. Now, I don't have any of his WCW figures. I don't have his original San Francisco toy maker figure. I don't have his other figure from there. But eventually, people were getting tired of him there too. Hulk started getting booed everywhere he went. He started getting booed in all of the WCW arenas. And so initially, Eric Bischoff, who was in charge of WCW at the time, he went to Hulk and he asked him, what if we made you a bad guy? What if we made you heel? And Hulk's like, ooh, that could be just the thing to boost my career back up. So at Bash at the Beach, these two guys went in against Luger, Sting, and Macho Man. And like I said in the last video, Luger got hauled away on a stretcher. Now at this point in the storyline, Hulk Hogan had not been around in months. He had these epic matches with Ric Flair on pay-per-views, and he had his rivalries with Kevin Sullivan, but at this point, he was off making a movie. He hadn't been seen in months. So he wasn't even a thought at this point. So he hadn't even been seen. So Bash at the Beach happens. Luger's taken out, so then it's just Hall and Nash versus Sting and Macho. So then Hulk Hogan comes out, still dressed in his red and yellow. He comes out, he hits the ring, and everybody thinks, oh, he's here to join Luger and Macho to make up their three. But Macho was down. Hogan, drops the leg on Macho, and everybody was like, oh, blown away, because at this point Hulk Hogan had been the biggest babyface ever. So then he drops the leg on Macho, his brother, and then he joins the ranks of these two guys. And I can remember the moment when that happened, and Mean Gene Okerlund came into the ring, started interviewing Hogan, and at that point, people were throwing garbage and crap all over in the ring. They're throwing paper, they're throwing full cups of soda at the ring, and Mean Gene's like, Hulk Hogan, I want some answers. You're coming out here saying you're going to join the likes of these two? You got to be kidding me. And those were his exact words. So then Hulk Hogan's first words out of his mouth was, Mean Gene, first thing you got to do is make these people shut up if you want to hear what I got to say. So at that point, people started booing so much. Oh my goodness. Oh, that moment, it's ingrained into my memory. So then Hulk Hogan goes on this rant. Excuse me. So Hulk goes on this rant about how all those years of doing everything for the kids and the charities, he did it all for the money. And then he went on to say, you can call this the New World Order of Wrestling, brother. But then he kept calling it the New World Organization. But I remember at some point during that moment, after that match, a fan had kind of jumped over the railing and had crawled into the ring, and Hall and Nash started beating the crap out of the guy. And I remember Scott Hall literally stomping the crap out of this fan's head. Just stomping the crap out of it. And I just remember that distinctly. So then Hogan, Hall, and Nash, they all left the ring together, hand in hand. And from that point on, they started absolutely wreaking havoc in WCW. They started mowing through all of their talent. They started wiping out everybody in WCW. Until eventually, they basically half the company was in the nWo. So eventually, though, the nWo broke up. And WCW kind of went back to normal, but at that point, WWF had started winning in the ratings. They had started going with the Attitude Era. They had started winning the ratings war, and eventually WCW was bought by the WWF. But this is the Mattel retro figure of Hollywood Hogan. Him, along with Hall, Nash, and Six, all four of them were available in a 4-pack. They came in sets of 2. It was Hogan and X-Pac, Hall and Nash. But I like this figure. It was exclusive to Ringside Collectibles. And I've actually gotten comments from some of you that say you thought the Hogan figure was kind of overblown. I don't think so. I mean, I don't agree, because I guess the argument was that because his figure is so much bigger than like the Undertaker and the Kane figure. Well, I agree with that. However, they should have just made Undertaker and Kane bigger. But that's kind of the deal with Mattel Retros. And I'm going to go in and talk about my initial thoughts of the Mattel Retros and sort of some of my issues with them. But anyway, I really like this figure. You know, I like these two of the set. This one, it's not really that good. This is actually the same mold they used with the Rock action figure, the Rock Mattel Retro. They use the same body, same mold. It's just a different head, different paint. And then this is just god-awful. I don't like these at all, but you all know that. But that's kind of the story of the nWo. It was actually a great time to be a wrestling fan, because I can remember at one point during the Monday Night Wars, because Raw taped their show and WCW was live, I had satellite TV at the time. So Monday Nitro came on like 3 hours early than they normally would. So what I would do is I would watch like maybe an hour of Nitro live. Then I would kind of switch over to the WWF and watch all of Raw. Then I would switch back over and watch the last kind of couple hours of Nitro, because I would catch the re-showing of Nitro. They would show it twice. And so I would catch like the re-showing of Nitro. And it was just kind of a really good time to be a wrestling fan. At the time, I was more interested in what WCW was doing with the nWo, much more than I was with the WWF. What they were doing with like Stone Cold and D-Generation X and guys like that. I didn't care about that as much as the nWo stuff, because the nWo stuff felt real. I mean, it felt like it was really happening. In fact, they did this one show at Disney's MGM Grand, or just in Disney's MGM Studios, and at one point, Hogan, Hall, and Nash came out, and they started like beating the tar out of a lot of WCW guys, and they had baseball bats, and they were like wreaking havoc and really beating, and it was causing a really big scene, and it felt so real that the people in the area called the cops. And at one point, the police showed up, ready to kind of break things up, until one of WCW's executives said, "No, this is all a work. You know, this is all part of the storyline of what we're doing here tonight." So, but the police stayed just to kind of add kind of a presence. But anyway, that is the story of the nWo, and that is the story of these Mattel Retros. So, anyway, Hollywood Hogan. There's his Hasbro, there's his Mattel Retro. But then there's one more Hulk Hogan figure that I kind of wanted to show you. It's the only other one I have, and it's one of the only regular Mattel figures that I have. So it's actually this guy, this right here. This is the regular Hogan Mattel figure. You know, it's fully posable. And I've often said on this channel, I don't really like the new fully posable figures. Just because for me, having to fully pose them the whole time just kind of gets in the way. And it's kind of a hassle. But like I said, these these figures, they look cool, and they look cool sitting on a shelf, and I can understand why people, like figure collectors, collect them. But as far as practicality and actually trying to play with them and use them, I'm not really a big fan. Although I used to have quite a few of these. At one point, I had just a big old pile of these Mattel figures. And it's only because my first wife worked at a department store. So a lot of times she would come home and she would bring me these wrestling figures. And then initially, she bought me the Mattel like scale ring, like the ring that's actually like sized realistically. And from that on, I used to like have matches like in front of her just so that she could see that I was getting some enjoyment out of them. So, but eventually, her and I decided that we kind of wanted to move out of state initially. So that's when and plus, Mattel was coming out with so many new figures, I couldn't keep up anymore. I would go to Target and I would see, oh, and they've got a Four Horsemen set. I'm like, I just can't keep up. I gotta pay bills. I can't buy wrestling figures. So it just got to the point where I'm never gonna get all the figures that I want. So I just gave up and I sold all of my collection, with the exception of this one, and a John Cena figure only because my dog had chewed part of the foot. But I eventually just sold off the rest of my Mattel collection. And if you're a person that collects Mattel, that's great. And actually, I've seen videos where guys like take Mattel figures and they actually have matches, and some of them are actually really good. Some of them actually take the time to actually do a big production out of it. They actually have like a Titantron screen that lights up, and they actually have like an actual ramp, and then they actually have like lighting on the ring, and they actually show like commentators at ringside. They get like close-up camera shots, and they do shots like move by move, and they actually bend them, and it's actually quite impressive what they can do with them. And I applaud those guys, and I've seen those videos. Those videos are great, and I love them. But anyway, I've kind of gotten off the rails with the Mattel Retros. This one was really supposed to be just about this one figure, but I kind of decided to kind of, go out with a bang and kind of talk about his kind of career. And honestly, there's so much to cover with Hulk Hogan's whole career. I'll probably do like a whole like Hulk Hogan video and kind of talk about some of my favorite Hulk Hogan moments. But for now, Hollywood Hogan Mattel Retro. I love it. And that is going to conclude this video. We're running over 18 minutes long now, but sometimes that's how it goes. Anyway, if you're new here, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.